Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the 91st Academy Awards. As a show, I think its legacy of this certain ceremony will definitely be, it is the one where Green Book won Best Picture, which has already pretty much been anointed as one of the worst Best Picture winners, maybe of all time, definitely since Crash. And I think most people, and as someone who's seen both Crash and Green Book can attest, it's definitely worse than Crash, so it's like, this is worse than Crash. One thing I don't like about the whole Oscar ceremony and how we write about it and talk about it is you have a 3-hour, 4-hour show, basically, and whatever happens in the last like 5-6 minutes is what dictates basically what you think about the whole thing, and you don't really get a vibe for the whole show. And I think this show was better than Green Book winning, although that's a part of it, so I guess it's not. But the rest of the show moved very quickly. It actually benefited quite a lot from not having a host. It moved by quickly. The presenters were a lot funnier than they usually are. There was a lot less fat and filler in this one. Like, it went over 3 hours, but not by much. I think by like 5-10 minutes, which is like pretty damn good. Like, there's often times where it's like 11:30 midnight when you get to Best Picture. They got this shit done early, and the evening news wasn't like too shifted by the whole thing, even though I think they're still doing that Whiskey Cavalier thing after the news. I don't know, whatever. They did a good job of keeping it tight. There are a lot of great winners. There are a lot of good surprises that weren't Green Book, which was horrible. That's the main thing of my main experience with this Oscars, is kind of the good things we got from this Oscars and not, you know, Green Book, which bleh. That's the one thing to take away from this Oscars, I would say. And I know it's like lame to say, look at the positive, but the positives were pretty amazing. The biggest, I think, win for all of us, and what was my best film of the year, and I think most people watching this will agree, was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse winning Best Animated Feature, which is awesome. It is Disney's won apparently for 8 years in a row. Jesus. Between Pixar movies and Disney movies and all that. So I'm glad to have that to be broken. I'm glad that Phil Lord and Chris Miller finally have Oscars. Peter Ramsey, Rodney Rothman, Bob Brutischetti. They did an amazing motion picture and really caught everybody off guard. Of the animated films, it's the one that surprises me the most. It's the one that thrills me the most. It's visually, it takes more risks than any other animated film. The one thing is, like, I'm glad Mirai got that shot. You know, Mirai was the only film in this list that didn't get, you know, a big release in the US. It really didn't get a very good release at all. So if there's like a movie you need to check out, I know Cold War is kind of getting the most attention of like the movies you hadn't heard of before the Oscars kind of thing. I'd say take the time to see Mirai, although I feel like most of you guys are going to do that. I was really happy that Alfonso Cuarón won so much between Best Foreign Language Film and Best Director, which is the second time he's won. There are actually only 3 directors to ever won 2 Best Director Oscars and not win Best Picture, and Ang Lee is the other one because he had Brokeback, which interestingly enough lost to Crash, and then he had Life of Pi, which won, but then Argo won Best Picture. And then in this, with Cuarón, he won for Gravity, 12 Years a Slave won, and now he won tonight for Roma, and then Green Book won. And then another guy from like the beginning of the Oscars, which is interesting that keeps happening. The director-picture split seems to be a lot more common nowadays. It used to really not be common at all. Roma, it won 3 awards, and everyone went to Alfonso Cuarón, which is awesome. The film that won the most Oscars is Bohemian Rhapsody with 4. I don't know, guys. A Star is Born won Best Song, which I think everyone expected it to do. It continued the tradition of movies called A Star is Born only winning 1 Oscar. It is the first version of A Star is Born to win an award that a previous version had won, which was Best Original Song, because the Barbra Streisand won Best Original Song. That was weird that she came up to present a clip package and she did Black Klansman, and everyone's like, so this is going to be Star is Born though, right? Even though I think Star is Born had already been done, but I think we're all like, hadn't it? I forget who introduced everyone. I can't remember who introduced every clip package, but I was happy Regina King won Best Supporting Actress. That was a great speech, probably one of the best speeches of the night. Great way to kick things off. If Beale Street Could Talk is one of the most underrated films in terms of these ones. I know it got a lot at the Independent Spirit Awards, but Regina King, I think it was awesome starting off the night that way. Apparently, according to Kyle Buchanan, who is probably the greatest Oscar pundit there is. He works for the New York Times. He previously worked for Vulture. He wrote that only 3 black women have ever won Oscars not in the acting categories, and 2 of those were tonight, which is not a great statistic, but not a statistic that makes you feel good. That's still an awesome thing that happened tonight, that more black women won outside of acting categories than have ever won before in one single ceremony. I think is something to be happy about, particularly Hannah Blecker for Best Production Design, who's the first African American ever nominated in that category and then won, so it's like pretty amazing right there. Both the technical categories that Black Panther won, which was Best Production Design and Best Costume Design, were very well deserved. And in terms of the below the line things, I think a lot of them, well, that was kind of a mixed bag, I gotta say. That might have been worse than anything, because you get to, like, let's say visual effects. As much as people are like, I do think First Man is kind of a film that got really overlooked and under discussed, especially for what it was. That sequence, if you've seen the film, that sequence that is on the moon is really amazing and really thrilling. It's not the kind of visual effects that are maybe as showy as Infinity War, and I think Infinity War should have won for that. Visual effects is kind of a weird category, because it's like, what was that year they gave it to Ex Machina? I'm sure that was a cool thing to do, is like a different thing, but oftentimes they don't want to go with the big movie, and I think for them Infinity War was too much of the typical big movie. But then if you look at how smart those visual effects were, particularly at letting actors kind of like Josh Brolin, for example, has brought up that he did a lot of his stuff in like smaller stages so he could give an intimate performance, and they used that with the special effects to give that film the vibe it did. There's probably more that film did with special effects in terms of getting good performances than actually in the film that won Best Visual Effects, which was First Man, which to show off the kind of spectacle and awe of the moon. This, in Infinity War, they used it for spectacle, but they also used those visual effects to make a lot of good character moments, but it doesn't matter now because it didn't win Best Visual Effects, which I think a lot of people were disappointed by. That was surprising, you know, especially because First Man was, interestingly enough, Universal's first push for a lot of Oscars, and then it clearly wasn't really getting much traction, so then they went with Green Book. So that's... Then when you get to film editing, I think it's kind of shocking that Bohemian Rhapsody won that, because the film editing was quite horrendous in that, and especially John Ottman, who has been with Bryan Singer like the whole time. Like, this guy's been editing everything for Bryan Singer. You know, John Ottman is getting credit for kind of assembling Bohemian Rhapsody, but I was like, it's still Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, the editing in that movie is ostensibly really bad. I mean, that movie's super cringy. It's not very well put together. I don't really understand the love the Oscars has for Bohemian Rhapsody, specifically in both the sound categories, which often it feels like they just give it to a movie which had music or had explosions. But I'm like, why was Star is Born not in there? Like, I don't think Star is Born should have gotten sound editing, but I also don't think Bohemian Rhapsody should have even been nominated, because sound editing is more about Foley and created sounds, and mixing is more about, you know, mixing. They really wanted to give Bohemian Rhapsody things, and then, you know, Best Actor as well, which I didn't pick Rami Malek, I think because I didn't want him to win. I think he's good as Freddie Mercury. That sequence, that end sequence, the Live Aid sequence, is mainly made both based on performance. It isn't really how I think normally you would shoot a sequence like that, but nonetheless, I think what Rami Malek does in some scenes is good, but I don't know if it's like the best acting of the year, and I was disappointed by that. But that one wasn't totally unexpected. I think a lot of people thought RBG would win for Best Documentary. Free Solo won. If you're listening, most predictions, most people were more in the industry were saying Free Solo was winning over a bunch of people. Finding the Gap is actually on Hulu. It was a Hulu produced documentary. I know nothing about it other than it was Hulu's first nomination. They didn't win tonight. I do think the short categories kind of made more of an impression Bao, because Bao was pretty well known at this point, as it got a lot of attention, media attention when it was released, and it was in front of a movie that made like $600 million in this country alone. So a lot of people had seen that one. And the live action people, the Skin movie seemed weird, but those people were so exuberant. Right in the year when most people were like, hey, why don't we get rid of these short categories? I kind of remember all of them. Interestingly enough, they really made an impression with their speeches and everything. And that is the other thing about not having a host, is you can really focus on the awards. I feel like oftentimes, you know, I've done these review reaction things of the Oscars, and I'm trying to remember every stupid bit Jimmy Kimmel did in between having, you know, normal people go to a movie theater. And this made it really more about the awards, which I quite like. I actually feel like I took in more of the awards this time, and the parts that I really give a shit about, which is the awards, not some comedian or host doing all these things. So to be honest, I would be fine if they like didn't have a host anymore. But the cool things of the night, maybe let's talk about the positive things, because I talked about Black Panther and that winning, you know, Best Best score, I wasn't as into that score. I do like that score, and I like things about that score, but it's not like the Beale Street score in particular, which I thought was phenomenal and one of the most amazing scores. Maybe my choice for the best score of the year. Marvel scores are not one of their strong suits, so it's a little interesting that a Marvel score would win. I would say the Black Panther score of the Marvel scores, I would say it's one of the better ones. Best foreign language film. Apparently it's the first time Mexico won best foreign language film, interestingly, which doesn't seem right to me, but I keep seeing that places, so I'm gonna act like hopefully it's true. Best cinematography, which is a big thing because he worked with Emmanuel Lubezki, who apparently couldn't do it because of scheduling conflicts with something. I'm not exactly sure what. That's a big deal because Kran's films are well known to be very well shot, and he usually works with Emmanuel Lubezki or Chivo, who's really one of the best cinematographers maybe ever, and definitely working right now. And for him to not only shoot it himself, but do well enough to win an Oscar really says something about him as a cameraman, and how well, I think, if you have a director who really knows how to use a camera, I think that really says something about them as a filmmaker, and you can tell that they understand how to use a DP and a cinematographer the way a lot of directors use actors or score or anything like that. I think it shows how good Kran is visually, that he was able to do that and win best cinematography, and justifiably so, because Roma was one of the best shot films of the year. Mahershala Ali, you know, I don't like Green Book. I'm happy that he has more Oscars because he's a great actor. You should check out True Detective and never watch Green Book. And I think the big surprise of the night was, for me, other than Best Picture, was Olivia Colman winning Best Actress. I really thought it was going to be Glenn Close. I think everybody thought it was going to be Glenn Close. Olivia Colman came up and gave The Favorite its only win. Olivia Colman's one of those actors who I just love in almost everything. If she's in something, I will see it just because I think she's such a great actress. You should definitely see Peep Show. It's an amazing show, and she's done a lot of great stuff on English TV, and she's going to be the queen in The Crown on Netflix soon. But she's just such a beautiful, amazing actress, and she was really good in The Favorite. I don't know if that's my favorite performance. I always think of her definitive performance as Peep Show. I know she's done a lot of other stuff, and she's always been great in all of it. I love seeing her in anything, and I loved her speech. Hers was one of the most surprised, fun speeches of the night. I think Regina King's was very much poised and smart and intelligent, and all these wonderful things. Olivia Colman was just shocked to be up there and had a lot of fun. All that stuff. It was just, she was really clever and really wonderful. Rami Malek's was pretty boring. I do not get this love for Bohemian Rhapsody. I do not know why it won so many things. I don't really understand why they played We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions at the beginning with Adam Lambert. That was, sure, I just don't, whatever. It was amazing seeing Spike Lee win for Best Adapted Screenplay. As someone who currently lives in Brooklyn and has been a longtime Spike Lee fan and can't believe he hadn't won an Oscar at this point, it was amazing that he won a competitive Oscar. He has a Student Academy Award, he has an honorary Oscar, he's been nominated before, but this is the first time he won a competitive Oscar, and justifiably so. That was amazing and awesome, and I'm so happy that Spike Lee won. I think that's one of the big takeaways of this night, is Spike Lee has an Oscar. He's an Oscar-winning screenwriter, at least. Spike Lee. I mean, he's still an Oscar winner and a director, but he's not an Oscar, you know. It would have been nice if he had won. I kind of knew he wasn't going to win when Del Toro, when it showed, before their cutting commercial, it showed Del Toro with the envelope. I remember when they gave it to Scorsese and they had like Spielberg, Lucas, and Coppola give him the award, and it's like we all knew what it was going to be, and that's kind of the same thing that happened here. It's cute when they do that. They did that also with Best Makeup, where they like did the package for Vice and then did Best Makeup, and I was like, okay, you guys claim you don't know who's gonna win until you open the things, but I beg to differ. We all knew it was probably gonna go to Vice, but the timing was not 100% great on that one. But yeah, it was amazing to have two of my favorite filmmakers, Spike Lee and Alfonso Cuarón, Phil Lord and Chris Miller as well. That was kind of one of the big highlights, and to have two major categories like Best Actor go to Rami Malek, who's sort of more doing an impression, and then the Green Book win, which I literally just dropped my phone. I was just like, I can't believe that. And you'd think with the preferential ballots, like, I know the PGA won the PGA, fine, whatever. And it did have weight behind it, but it just, with the preferential ballots and such divisive opinions, I would have thought it would have canceled it out, which means most of the Academy was sort of just chill with Green Book, which is not a comfortable thing to think. Best Original Screenplay, I actually called that one because I thought, like, they will be that stupid to give it at least this. I was very disappointed by that. I don't have a ton of faith in the Oscars, but I think it would have been amazing for, you know, especially the big story with the nominations is how the new voting base was picking more foreign language films, and film seemed to pick more kind of festival favorites than they had previously. And you saw that in Best Cinematography, you saw that in Best Director, with more foreign language film representation. And you would have thought that Best Picture would reflect that, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Having, you know, the first foreign film win Best Picture, I think, would have been a huge step forward. And instead, they took a ton of steps back by giving it to Green Book, which I think was really upsetting. You know, they could have given it to Black Panther, they could have given it to A Star Is Born. Instead, they picked that film. A lot of people will now check it out because of the divisive opinions of it, and so many people are so upset. But it was really like, you picked that movie, and that movie is just an outdated kind of thing. It's like when Dances with Wolves won, or Driving Miss Daisy, or, you know, the kind of the early 90s were a really bad period for films winning the Oscars, and that Best Picture win took me back to that. I think there are a lot of good in terms of people winning, like Spike Lee, like The Spider-Verse, like Quran, things like that. But Green Book kind of sours the whole evening, unfortunately. Kind of ruins the amazing positivity and the amazing feeling you had leaving the Oscars. You know, you're leaving the Oscars going like, oh, cool, they did it. They awarded a lot of stuff I like. But it's kind of like, they awarded a lot of the stuff I like, and a lot of the stuff that means something to me and will be around in 20 years. And then they topped it off with Green Book. And you kind of bring that into question, the whole kind of ceremony. You know, I think we all had a great time, and it all kind of just got shit on at the end with that. And that was just so utterly disappointing, when you could have done an amazing thing. You know, you should have nominated Spider-Verse for Best Picture. You should have nominated Beale Street for Best Picture. You should have nominated a bunch of things. But if you look at those nominees, there's no way in hell Green Book was one of the better ones, you know. I think that was an utter mistake, and having something like Roma there, regardless of, I know the Netflix thing was like the thing that pissed people off the most. Netflix, you know, pushed themselves further than any streaming platform has done, and after they joined the Motion Pictures Association, maybe they shouldn't have done that so close to voting, because maybe that upset people, and they're like, no, I'm not going to let Netflix have Best Picture, because Best Picture is still a big deal for the Oscars and the industry, and maybe they're just more comfortable letting Universal have it with Green Book. It just ruins the whole thing, because you kind of can't get over it. You're like, holy crap. I don't know. It was a surprise. It definitely was a surprise, but the Olivia Colman thing was like an awesome surprise. This is like oh, you did that. The only good thing I can say about Green Book is that Mahershala Ali won, and I'm happy about that, but I'm not happy that, one, this movie exists. I'd like to hope crap like this won't fly, but it's like the Oscars always find a way to out-Oscar themselves, and they did it again this year, and even worse than usual. So if you would like to talk about the 91st Academy Awards, what you thought of the show, what you thought of everything that happened, then comment below in the comments how happy you are about Spider-Verse, hopefully, and subscribe if you would like to. Bye.